Here we are. We are live. This is for your first time, Matt, right?
Yeah, with this system, yes, it is.
Sweet. It's good to have you. Look forward to hearing a lot more from you. So today we've got Matt Just, and we're going to be talking about application discovery with Aria Operations for networks. And as always, we're booked out every other Thursday, starting at noon Pacific time. So a week from today, we're going to have Scott McDermott come in talking about preparing your environment for deploying Aria Suite. Going to be some really good content in there, particularly talking about user management. And then coming up on June 22nd, we're going to have Nico come in with getting more out of capacity management. So that's going to be another good one for a lot of you folks that have capacity management questions. And then right after 4th of July, Scott's going to be coming back with setting up Aria automation config for configuration management. So lot of good cloud management across the board there. As always, these sessions are going to be recorded, and then they're available through whatever social media channel you happen to be watching through right now. But also they will be under the cloud management section in VMware Tech Zone. We're working on getting those up so you have an archive, just in case you've missed previous ones and don't want to scroll back through your various social channels. They'll all be in one space for everybody to access quickly and easily. So if you have people who are onboarding with your company that want to go back and catch up on some information, or you happen to miss one because you're out on PTO or whatever the case might be, they will all be in one convenient spot. So with that, I'm not going to take up any more time. Matt, it's all you, my buddy. Rock and roll.
Thank you. Go ahead, switch over to the slides here. Great, thanks. So as Anders was saying, my name is Matt Just. I'm a staff technical marketing architect here at VMware. Today I'll be presenting the Getting More Out of session on application discovery simplified with Aria Operations for networks. So what our goal is with this is I'd like to show how we can utilize Aria Operations for networks to better understand what makes up an application and what's our application dependencies, what are our application boundaries, and so on, which we'll touch on also in regards to the various different use cases that we would want to utilize and be able to understand these applications and the constructs that make up these applications. So starting off, let's talk about VMware Aria Operations for Networks. So many of you may have heard we've done some rebranding here at VMware. So what used to be vRealize Network Insight is now VMware Aria Operations for Networks. So what the product is, and just kind of from a high level perspective before we dive into the application piece, is it's a product that allows us to be able to provide an agnostic broad-end visibility, end-to-end visibility, focusing on the application. Obviously, when we're dealing with networks and security and so on, we're delivering applications to our end users, and we're providing those roads and as to simplify it, that provide access to those applications. So to better ensure that those roads are properly maintained and paved and so on, and providing the best access to the applications for our end users, we need to understand what makes up an application and what the application dependencies are. And this comes into play when we're dealing with various different use cases, whether it's just understanding what applications are in our infrastructure, whether it's on-prem or even hosted within the cloud or SaaS environments from a multi-cloud perspective, or they could even be hybrid. We also look at this when we're dealing with monitoring, management, and troubleshooting our applications. It's important to understand what makes up an application and what their constructs are and what dependencies they have. And then lastly, when we're dealing with application migrations, we want to make sure that we understand the applications and the dependencies, and also the requirements of that application from an infrastructure perspective to be able to properly migrate the application from, whether it's from an on-premises data center to a VMware cloud, such as VMC on AWS or AVS for Azure VMware solutions, or even if it's to native public cloud, such as native AWS or native Azure or even GCP. So Aria Operations for Networks is a product that allows us to provide that visibility that goes across from private cloud to into from our virtual infrastructure. Also focusing on our underlying infrastructure, so our physical and virtual networking devices that we have deployed, whether it's routers, switches, load balancers, and so on, firewalls, and then even extending that out to our SaaS environment. So whether it's an IaaS infrastructure, or we're getting into like VMC and AWS or VMware clouds, or even dealing with hyperscalers such as native AWS or Azure or GCP or many others. So we provide that broad end-to-end visibility, focusing on those key components with an application context in mind. And this allows us to map and understand how our applications are communicating, performing, and allows us to troubleshoot those applications at the most critical moments when we're dealing with application performance problems for end users. Now, from a collection standpoint and understanding a little bit about what I'm going to be talking about when I say data sources and so on, Aria Operations for Networks provides, again, the end-to-end visibility utilizing an agentless approach. And we provide this utilizing various different methods of data collection, whether it be related to using APIs that we utilize within, like, let's say, VMware products, or even non-VMware third-party products, dealing with things like SSH, SNMP, flow ingestion, other metadata, and so on, and even getting into things like streaming telemetry or data bus feeds from various different products and vendors that we support. So this is across our hybrid cloud, our public cloud, our different types of VMs, services, and so on, bare metal applications, our virtual infrastructure, IoT, getting into our data centers, and our various different cloud environments, both from an overlay and an underlay perspective, and even going out to our campuses and branch offices, and providing that visibility into uh, the infrastructure that our end users are utilizing to access these applications. And then lastly, just kind of touch, as I mentioned, we utilize an agnostic approach within Aria Operations for Networks, and not just focusing strictly, on VMware products, but also bringing in with many different companies that we work with and partner with. As you can see here, pretty much all the major players in the market that allow us to provide that full integration and visibility from your application through the underlying infrastructure out to the various cloud environments and so on. Okay, so let's talk about application discovery. So the first thing we need to understand is what makes up an application. And the way that we can do this with Aria Operations for Networks is we can utilize various different methods. So some methods we utilize, we can, can require some type of manual intervention, and others we can use that are fully automated in understanding and discovering those applications. So in this case, we can talk about various different ways that we can discover applications. And this is also going to be, dependent on how you structure your data center and your applications and how they're deployed and how you manage them today within your vCenter environment. So this could be things like tag base. A lot of customers that I would talk to focus on, when they're deploying their applications, they'll provide tags on their VMs and so on. Naming based conventions, utilizing CMDBs such as ServiceNow or other CMDBs to understand and map their applications. And then what we can do is we can also tie in the flow-based application discovery components that VMware Aria Operations for Networks provides. So this is utilizing machine learning and AI algorithms to be able to study the applications and study the flows that are occurring, since we're pulling in all flows one to one, to be able to understand what makes up an application and how the application communicates, and also what are the dependencies that application has, whether it's Active Directory, DNS, NTP, or even dependencies on a shared database, as an example, that other applications may share, or even other components of other applications, or even bare metal applications that are running, or services that are running on bare metal servers that we are pulling data from, or that the application has a dependency on. So many different ways that we can use the product to be able to do our application discovery. And I'm going to dive into those a little bit more and even get into a live environment demo to show how we can do that and simplify that for you within your infrastructure so that you can quickly understand these and move on with monitoring, managing, troubleshooting, and even planning migrations and so on, depending on what your end goal is. So when we start off looking at applications, we've got all these virtual machines and we've got all these Kubernetes services and so on. We even got bare metal components that within our applications. So when you look at this, when you look at the graph on the left here, you can kind of see, we've got all these VMs and all these connections, they could be flows and so on. All these, virtual machines and services are communicating with each other. And we're trying to map out and understand those, and again, understand how they're broken up, what makes up that application, what are those dependencies, and so on, and boundaries that the application has. So what we do is one of the easiest methods to automate this for you is within Aria Operations for Networks is to use flow-based application discovery. So this allows us to take the flows that we're ingesting within the product and be able to study those flows and use machine learning magic, as we call it, to be able to group those, as we can see, into such as our finance application, our marketing application, being able to see things like our Active Directory services that our virtual machines require access to. Same thing with DNS, could be NTP, and many other dependencies or services that we may have that are shared across many different applications. And this is key and important to understand when we're troubleshooting applications, and also when we get into planning migrations to make sure that we truly understand what makes up an application and the dependencies of that application. So what I'm going to do is I'll dive in here and we'll focus on looking at the various different methods that we can utilize VMware Aria operations for networks to be able to discover those applications utilizing various different methods. And one of the ones that I'm going to focus on, from a key perspective, is going to be the machine learning flow-based application discovery, which is an automated method that really simplifies understanding those dependencies and discovering those applications. All right, so let me jump over to our demo environment here. Okay, and Anders, just to confirm, can you see my screen? Okay, I'm going to assume that's a yes. So what I'm going to do, so what you're taking a look at here is you're looking at the primary interface when you log into Aria Operations for Networks. And can be our SaaS offering. So we do offer it in a SaaS offering. And we also have the product as an on-premises offering. So the look and feel of the product is the exact same depending on even where it's hosted, whether it's just the SaaS base that we host here at VMware, or it's the on-premises offering that you host within your own infrastructure. So as you can see here within the main dashboard, we have the option to focus in on applications. So I'm going to come over here and we're going to click on applications. And here we can either focus on all applications, which will take us to our application dashboard. And this is going to show us different things going on within our infrastructure. So any types of intents that may be failing, looking at from a security perspective, things like unprotected flows within our applications or dropped flows, any detected problems. We utilize various different detection mechanisms to be able to do anomaly detection within the applications, troubleshooting incidents that are currently ongoing within our infrastructure, and then also looking at things like newly discovered applications or even membership updates. So it's important that as we define and understand our applications and start to save and monitor and manage those applications, that as those applications, evolve or change over time. So let's say an example, a virtual machine that's running, a database that now gets converted over to, let's say, a Kubernetes service. We want to see those changes within the application and make sure we understand what has changed when the developer makes that change and applies that within the infrastructure. And then again, what those dependencies upon the infrastructure are, because those could change, obviously. So we're looking at membership updates. So anytime we see something change within the environment, we're going to be automatically alerted upon any membership updates so that we can take a look at those and see if we want to approve those within our system for visibility purposes. And then also breaking up and understanding where those application components live. So if I've got an application, let's say a 3-tier application, and it's made up of a web interface, front end interface, an application tier, and a database tier, they could be deployed all within on premises. They can be deployed across multi cloud. So we can have a hybrid cloud deployment where half my application lives on premises and the other half lives in the SaaS or into a cloud environment. Or it could be deployed within just native public cloud. So what we do is because of the visibility that we have within those applications, we can break those up and show you which applications are deployed within your cloud infrastructure, which applications are hybrid, and which ones are also deployed on premises. So we can take a look here at the list of applications that I currently already have discovered and within my infrastructure, and I can, dive into these and start looking at performance metrics and so on, troubleshooting, and much more, which I'll touch on a little bit. But what we're going to do here is we're going to talk about how we can simplify the discovery of these applications and automate that for you. So we're going to click on our Discover tab. And within the system, what we're going to see here is we're going to see that we've got, as I mentioned, various different methods that we can utilize to discover and understand the applications within our infrastructure. So in this case, we got flows. We can also use tags. So I can come over here and I can choose a template that I've defined, or I can just come in and start choosing a scope and say all VMs, and I can start defining tags and adding conditions for how I want to group my applications and also how I want to group them from a tier perspective. And then I can save that, create a template that I can use for later discovery purposes, or I don't even have to. I can just hit discover and discover using the tag option. I also can utilize names. So I can create a template, or I can just come in and say, I want to scope all virtual machines. I can see how many different virtual machines are found within my lab infrastructure here. And now I can start utilizing naming convention on how I want to group my applications or group my tiers. Now, the nice thing is, if you like to use regular expression to simplify discovering applications within your infrastructure, if you've got a lot of applications that are named very similar, you can simply come in and utilize the regular expression pattern builder that's built into the product. So here I can put in a name of a virtual machine. I can choose either different positions or I can choose an entire group. I'm going to see my regular expression defined, and I'm going to see the applications that are found. We also can integrate with CMDB such as ServiceNow. So if you have a CMDB defined, let's say within ServiceNow or any other vendors, we have ways that we can integrate and pull those into Aria Operations for Networks and utilize that for monitoring and also utilize it to even true up our database. So from a CMDB perspective, I may want to make sure that what I've got defined in my CMDB is accurate. And one of the nice things is because of all the flows that we're looking at and ingesting, we can actually confirm and verify what are the true, application boundaries, dependencies, and so on to utilize that to even true up our CMDB. And then we have some other advanced options where we can use a combination of methods such as tags and names and so on, and combine those in a way to be able to understand and discover applications. But what I want to focus on is one of the most popular methods that customers utilizing Aria Operations for Networks are utilizing today, and that is flow-based application discovery. So what this does is it allows us to take the flows and other data, such as configuration data and so on, that we see within vCenter, within our load balancers that we have deployed, such as dealing with pool members and such. So as you can see here in my scope, I've got all VMs. And my naming preference is going to be in the order of using load balancer configs. That's looking at our various different virtual servers and the pool members and so on. So we actually are pulling that from those load balancers to help also, better understand and utilize that data to define applications. We're also utilizing VM names, security tags, and security groups. And you can also change this. So if I want to come in and click Edit Discovery, I can come in here and I can choose which ones I want to utilize as part of the flow-based application discovery algorithm that is going to be running when on the back end. So here I've got these ones turned on, and this is the order I chose to put them in. I can come in and I also can reposition the order here, as you can see, as I'm moving these back and forth. So you also can utilize things like VM tags. So I can enable tags, and I can start, utilizing and defining application names and tags if I chose. And I can also come in and take a look at, from a discovery perspective, I can also utilize the upload CSV option. And what this allows us to do is if you want to take a CSV file, so you can actually download a template, and if you want to come in and put in utilizing VM names and define the application name, the tier name, and so on. If you want to put in IP addresses, whether it's IPv4 or IPv6, you can absolutely do that as part of your applications or even regular expressions within that CSV. And then you can browse and upload that CSV file, and it will utilize that CSV file as it's looking at the flows and discovering those applications. So we've got a lot of different ways and methods of data that we can utilize to also be able to better define those applications utilizing the machine learning algorithms that we're going to focus on. So I'm going to hit cancel here. And what this is now going to do is it's going to take what I've chosen, and I've gone in and I can also come in and I can turn on my discovery. I can stop it. I can pause it. And I also can come in, as mentioned, within the edit discovery, and I can choose my scope. So I can say I want to look at all flows, or I can say I just want to focus on a specific entity. So you may say, what if I just want to focus on a specific cluster, a specific data center, a vCenter, and so on, and not all flows and all applications within my data center infrastructures or cloud infrastructures? So here's where I can come in and I can choose that. I can choose by cluster, by data center, folder, resource pool, AWS VPC, Azure Virtual Network, vCenter, and many different other entities that I can focus on when it comes to defining my scope of what I want to focus on if I want to get very granular. I also can choose the duration. So by default, I'm going to go by 30 days. So that way I can, make sure that I'm capturing all dependencies within that application, because we all know that we've got applications out there that may have or be running, let's say, a script that runs once a month at midnight and on a certain date and requires specific network ports, protocols, and so on. So we want to make sure that we capture all that and understand that to make sure that we can properly discover and define our application and its boundaries and components. So I'm going to go ahead and cancel on this. So now here we can see the various different applications utilizing the naming preference that I've chose in that order that have been discovered by Aria Operations for networks. So here we can see that we've got our application name. We have a confidence level. So this is the algorithm confidence level that's running. We also have the number of tiers, the number of virtual machines, and then we have the option to save that application after it's been discovered. So as I scroll down through the system here, I can see various different applications that have been saved or been discovered. And this is actually being represented utilizing the way that I chose my naming preference to better help me understand what application it is that has been discovered. So if I'm using VM names as an example, it's going to utilize, if the name is called 3-tier app, it's going to show me that name so I can better understand what application it is referring to. So as I come down, I can see all these different applications that I've discovered within the system. I can see the confidence level, and that's going to run from a high to a medium to a low. And it will start at a low, and it's going to work its way up as the algorithms are running and studying the flows and discovering the applications. So it's going to run that, and over a period of so many hours, it's going to be able to define and tell us what makes up an application and give us that high confidence level that we're going to want when we're focusing on specific applications that we've discovered. So here we can see again various different applications that have been discovered within our system. I'm going to flip through, and like I said, you can see the medium, and as I go down, you can see the low. So we can come in and we can focus on different apps. Now, one of the things you'll notice also is it's showing me how many tiers make up that application and how many VMs make up that application in this example. So if I hit the plus here, I can actually take a look and see what tiers it's automatically created and grouped, and how many virtual machines, and what are the VM names that it has grouped within those tiers. So this application consists of a web front end, an application tier, and also a database tier. And we can see that it has put one VM within the actual database tier, and this is showing me the name of that virtual machine. And then it's also showing me as I highlight over here, I can see the full name of the virtual machine. So this is utilizing the name of a combination of the application, the virtual machine, and so on that I've deployed. And I actually deployed these utilizing Aria Automation. So it's going to include things like username, initials, and IDs, and so on that you typically would see when you're using Aria Automation. I also can see here that it created a web tier and it auto grouped those web VMs within that tier. And I can see that it created an app tier and it put 4 different application based VMs that are within that tier. And I can come over and I can click save, and I can rename this application to anything that I want to call it. So if have a specific naming convention that I want to use, that we use within our organization, I can simply come in and rename the application. I can just call it, VRNI Dynamic App A, as it's defined here. And then I also can come in and I can take a look at my various different tiers that Aria Operations for Networks have auto created. So here we can see the name of the tier and the virtual machines that it has automatically grouped within those tiers. And if I wanted to rename that tier, I can see that this is my database tier. So I can just simply come in and type in DB. I can see that this is my web tier. So I'm going to just go ahead and we'll just rename this to web. So depending on how you want to name your tiers, you can be very flexible within the system to be able to label those out. So I can change the names of my tiers. I can see all the members that are part of my application, such as the virtual machines, physical IPs, or if I was using Kubernetes in the environment, I would see the services. And then you also can get flexible and say, I want to add another condition. So if you want to customize an application, which in a lot of different times there may be situations where you want to see a specific database that is shared across multiple applications, and you want that database to be shown in every single application that is discovered and not shown as a dependency. So we can actually create additional members and add them depending on what we want to do, or VM bare metal IPs and so on that we want to add to that application. Now, the other thing that we have the option to do is enable the application-aware network health intents. So by doing this, what's going to happen is Aria Operations for Networks is going to utilize its intent engine, and it's going to start studying the performance of the application. So it's going to study the members of the application, what are things like the network throughput, and so on, packet drop, and look at all different types of various different data, and it's going to baseline that data and then run analysis across it. And if it starts to see that data deviate from its standard behavior, it's going to create alerts and alert us within the system, or send us emails or SNMP traps, or depending on how we want to be alerted within the system, to tell us, hey, there's something going on within the application, and it's related to this specific tier, this specific member, and this is what we're seeing. So I'll touch on that a little bit when we take a look inside the application view. So this will enable the automation of being able to do that utilizing intents that you can define within the system, or use the out-of-the-box intents. Now, if you didn't want to do that, you can simply leave this unchecked, and you can come in and you can define your own static-based intents. So you can come in and say any application or member of the application that exceeds X amount of throughput, I want to be alerted upon. So you can come in and you can customize and do your static and anomalies and so on that will run and check for within the system if you didn't want to use the automated system. But hey, when it comes to automation, why not just utilize the automated system and the capabilities with the intents, so that way we can simplify it and quickly understand what's going on within our applications and have that auto baseline performance there for us. So now once we've done that, we can go ahead and click save, and that's going to save our application and move it over into our application dashboard. So let's go back to our application dashboard here. So within the application dashboard, now we can see all of our different applications that we have discovered and already have saved within our system. And we can focus on those various different applications. So whether those applications live in your on-premises data center, hybrid cloud, VMware cloud, across hyperscalers, or even in native public cloud, we're going to see all those applications in one application list that allows us to click in and look at those applications and performance monitoring, troubleshooting, and so on, and also plan for migration if we were going to. So I'm going to go ahead and click on our Moad shopping cart that's deployed within our VMC on AWS environment. So within that application, now we can see that utilizing the methods of discovery that are part of Aria Operations for Networks, that we can actually dive into the application and start going into that day two monitoring, troubleshooting mechanisms and so on, depending on what we're trying to do, or even get into things like migration planning within our applications and having those broken up into tiers. So I can see my low gen tier, my front end tier, my database tier. I can see the members within those tiers, where they live. I can see that these are sitting in my on-premises vCenter. Sorry, it's my vCenter on VMC within VMC on AWS. And then I can also see other dependencies that it has, whether it's upon members of other tiers, and this is represented by flow lines that connect those tiers. I can click in and start looking at all the flows that are running and communicating between the members of that tier. I also can see my shared physical resources that it's utilizing, other applications or other bare metal servers or other services that it's utilizing. I can click in and take a look at those. And I also can see what is communicating to the internet. Or I can even see things like what's coming over VPN or what's coming in through an SD-WAN connection. We also up here can see an overview of our incoming traffic, our outgoing traffic, any changes over the last 24 hours, the number of flows that are within our application, how many are unprotected or being denied. We also can see any intents that are defined within the application. Again, so that those are those intents I was telling you, where it's baselining the performance and looking for any types of anomalies. This comes in very handy, especially when you want to automate your troubleshooting. You also can see that we have the capability to look at the what countries are interacting, from a flow perspective, because of the GeoIP lookup that we do across the flows that are incoming and outgoing of our application. So if I click on the countries, I can see that I've got the 3 different countries interacting with this application, and I can see that based on from a top-down approach, the United Kingdom with 18 flows, the United States and Ireland, and I can click in and look at these flow records if I want to look at performance metrics and so on, and see what's going on, or even troubleshoot. I can also see what makes up that application. So VMs, physical IPs, Kubernetes services. I got my topology here. I can also come down and I can see alerts that are only specific to this application within my infrastructure. And that could be in the overlay infrastructure, my virtual infrastructure. It can be in my underlying physical network. It could be in my cloud infrastructure. It could be things related to, let's say, a direct connect or a policy-based VPN, IPsec tunnels, and so on that you may have deployed, depending on where the application lives. And we can come in and we can click into these alerts and we can see what's going on. So this is one of those automatic intent-based alerts that I have running, and I can see 31 minutes ago, this one active, and I can see that it's telling me it's within the database tier of my application, and it's related to my application flow health. And what it's doing is it's looking at the average TCP round trip time for all of the flows related to the database, and it's set an upper bound average of 25 milliseconds. And it's telling me that there was an actual deviation that caused an anomaly. So over here, when I click on my view chart, I can see over the last 24 hours what that performance looked like and where I've got my baseline. And then I can see where I've had spikes in latency increase of my TCP round trip time within this specific tier and the members within that tier. So in this case, I can see that, I've jumped up past our baseline of 25 milliseconds. So I may want to take a look at this to see if this might be causing a issue within my application that the end users could be experiencing. Now, once this is restored to a normal state for a specific period of time, it can auto clear itself, or I can come in and I can manually clear it by clicking on archive if I chose to. And then I also can see my application member managers. So this is going to be my VMC SDDC. So I can see information regarding that VMC SDDC that the application lives in. If this was a hybrid application, I would see the VMC SDDC, I would see my on-prem vCenter, or I could even see my native AWS or Azure or any other cloud provider that we support within the product that members live within. I also can look at data quickly around what's new within my application, incoming traffic, outgoing traffic, drop flows, new members, unprotected members, and so on over the last 24 hours. And then I can also look at things like external services and application ports and so on that are utilized within that application, depending on where I'm running that application and what data I've chose to pull in from that infrastructure. I can look at metrics, so I can also see the members that make up my application, and I can see how those are performing. So these are actual virtual machines here. And as I scroll down, I can see the manager, the IP address of the virtual machine, both IPv6 and IPv4. I can see the disk, and then I can also expand this to even see more information, such as what vCenter is it powered on, what operating system is it running, and so on. What storage is it utilizing? What distributed port group or distributed switch is deployed on? And if I'm running NSX in my overlay, I can even see the NSX properties that are being utilized by this virtual machine, in this case, this web front end, within my application that I've discovered, along with performance data. Now, and I can scroll through and see the various different members and how they're performing. I also can take a look at my top talkers. So I can look at my flows over the last 24 hours and see from a top-down view here, where is the most communication and where are the most amount of traffic from a flow perspective. So I can see the web front end has this virtual machine specifically here has 46 flows, and over the last 24 hours has used 386.6 gigabytes of flow traffic, directly to that member within the application. Same thing goes with my database tier and my load gen tier. And then I can also see any applications that have hit specific flows. Now in this, or rules, rules within my firewalls, whether it be north-south, east-west, distributed firewall, or north-south firewall. And this is actually looking at my NSX overlay that's automatically deployed in VMC on AWS. So it'll show me that. And then if I'm also running NSX Intelligence, I can also see the application IDs and so on that are pulled in from NSX Intelligence in that infrastructure. From a microsegmentation perspective, this is where I can get in and start understanding from a security perspective where I have protection within the application or where I need to implement microsegmentation within that application. So I can see where my traffic distribution is, how much traffic this application is utilizing from an east-west, north-south perspective, from a layer 2 switch to a layer 3 east-west perspective, and also from a VM to VM, or if it's within, let's say, the same physical host or AWS VPC or Azure VNet, and much more. And then I can get into looking at various different things by grouping my application either by tier or VLAN or VM, depending on how I want to implement microsegmentation. And then I can also come in and take a look at and see. So in this case, I can see my 3 different tiers that make up this specific application, the number of members that are within those tiers. And then I can come in and I can click on that to take a look at the information within that tier of all the different flows, the services being accessed, how many flows are incoming and outgoing, performance data, And I can also look at my recommended firewall rules that I can take and export and import into my firewall vendor of choice, and be able to utilize these suggested rules based on the full flow analysis that we're doing, to be able to microsegment this specific tier, because I'm looking at this from a tier level, and the members within that tier, and apply a security posture. I can also look and see if I have any matching rules already deployed, that the existing flows that we're seeing based off the flow data that we're using to create these rules could already be utilizing or hitting, to make sure I don't have any rule sprawl or rule overlap. So in this case here, I can see it's just hitting the default any allow rule, which is automatically deployed in my VMC environment by NSX when you first provision. So I can leave this rule checked, and I can come over and export it as a CSV or as an XML and populate that within my firewall of choice. And then lastly, I can come over and click on intents, and I can look at my intent violations. I can see which ones are active currently. The ones that are grayed out down here are ones that were active, and I can see the time range that it was active. So from 135 to 256, this intent was active. What tier, what application, and it's focusing obviously on our specific application we clicked on, and what are the baselines that it set, and what type of metric it's looking at, and then where there was deviation. So from a historical standpoint, we can go back up to 13 months and take a look at when we've had anomalies that have occurred that could have impacted that application. And there's many different ways we can dive in and search for these anomalies, whether it's within the application view or even using a search-based Elasticsearch engine that we have built in the product, and can just like you're using Google, search for it and find any type of anomalies related to any component of the application or the application itself. Okay, so with that, that is a way that we can easily take and consume and utilize Aria Operations for Networks and discover applications in a quick fashion, utilizing things like flow-based application discovery, machine learning, understanding the communication that is occurring within our application, and being able to then define and understand what makes up that application from a member perspective, what dependencies and what boundaries that application has. So then we can move into our next, our next set of, whether it's from a day two perspective, looking at monitoring, managing, and troubleshooting, or if we're going to get into doing things like migration planning. So we can do many different things here, and we can get into that. I'll look at doing another getting more out of session where we can talk about application migration and how we can do that utilizing Aria Operations for Networks and Aria migration to accomplish that and simplify that process for you. So let me go ahead and switch back to my slides here. Okay, so that is pretty much our session for today. Before you leave, I do have a slide here that has an option that you can click on the QR code, or you can actually take a picture of it utilizing your camera on your phone and so on. And this will allow you to join or sign into or receive VMware Rewards and Champions program to earn exclusive swag and also experiences since you watched this webinar today. You take advantage of this. It's always nice to get free swag and free experiences that you can access. I'll leave this up here for a minute so you can take advantage of that. And other than that, I'm going to wrap it up. I appreciate everyone attending. I hope you found this informative, and I hope you have a nice day.